Hi, welcome to Lost in Composition. I'm Paul. I'm sitting down with Juili Adams today in her home. She's been gracious enough to let us film here. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. So, are you from Seattle?
I'm from Issaquah originally.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, almost from
Almost.
Seattle.
Close.
Pacific
yeah.
Northwest,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so from Issaquah, Cougar Mountain area?
Right, the unincorporated county between Bellevue and Issaquah, up on the foothills up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where the cookies are named after?
I guess so, Cougar Mountain cookies.
Yes,
Yeah.
the blue raspberry. I want one.
Yeah,
Yep,
here we go.
yep.
Yeah.
So you started creating art at a very young age. And do you remember what one of your first artistic endeavors was?
A whole bunch of things just flew into my mind. One of which was, I think I created like any kid creates. I don't think I was particularly special in that regard. But I did have a project of saving my bubble gum once on the back of my closet door, which enraged my father. I don't know why I did that. I was probably 5 years old.
You started the gum wall before the gum wall was cool.
I started the gum wall before the gum wall was cool, exactly.
Yeah.
But once I got a little bit older, maybe 8, 9, 10, when kids are kind of turning outward again, I went very much inward. Mm-hmm. And so I had a world of my own, and I created a small world of my own, so miniature everything. And if I could conceive of it, I went to work trying to build it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And so you had mentioned that your earliest influences were children books. Do you still like to read?
I love to read. Sadly, I don't as much anymore because I have eye problems, so it's uncomfortable to read. But I've read thousands of books. I love books. And when I was a kid, I got to read the classics of my generation, Winnie the Pooh and Alice in Wonderland. And part of those books is that they're literary and beautifully written, and they're also, the artwork's beautiful. The artwork's as magical as the writing is.
Mm-hmm. And you said that some of the books that impacted you most on your website were the Finn Family Moomin Trail. Did I say that right?
No. Finn Family Moomin Troll.
Moomin Troll series.
They're written by, I don't know how to, I've never heard her name pronounced, Tove Jansson, maybe she's Finnish, and she wrote those books in the 50s. She's been dead a while now. But they're very moody, dark, beautiful, atmospheric books, and she did all the artwork for them, lithographs for them. They're really popular in other places, other countries like Japan. You still see Moomin plushies and things, and cartoons and stuff like that. And of course, much more so in Europe. But I've read them to adults by a campfire, just a chapter, and I heard one person say, "I don't understand."
Okay, now I'm going to have to look these up.
Yeah, it was this character who was facing doom, but it wasn't really clear whether the doom was inside of her or outside of her. And eventually the sea overtook everything, and she was left with nothing, and that's kind of how it went. Okay. And maybe that's a Finnish thing, that stoicism. But but the whole thing isn't that way. It's delightful too. It's hard to describe. They're really incredible books.
I'll have to check those out. Yeah. And also, you had mentioned Alice in Wonderland, Wind in the Willows, and Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
I can see how Alice in Wonderland impacted your work. I'm not super familiar with Wind in the Willow, but I did look it up, and I can see that too. But Winnie the Pooh, I don't understand the impact there.
Well, first of all, it's a perfectly written book. The writing's gorgeous. So it's not dumbed down for children. It's beautifully written. And it has darkness in it too, which I'm kind of drawn to, like the hole or the heffalump, even this unknown, unnameable monster. But it was also stuffed animals that were as alive to Christopher Robinson as any person. And my whole world was stuffed animals. I hated dolls and Barbies.
Okay.
But I really loved stuffed animals, and I made a world with them. And so for me, it was a continuation of that sort of magical realism that childhood is.
Okay.
I think this cat wants to be under my shirt.
That's okay.
There we go.
She's super cute.
Okay. Here it is. Yeah.
You
Oh,
gonna
she's
get in on
happy.
that?
Yeah. Hopefully the mic is okay.
No, it's fine, I'm sure.
But yeah, so it was, it was, but it was also somewhere in my mind the knowledge that somebody had created this beautiful world, that it didn't come from a child, it came from an adult, that there was still magic in adults and magic in the world. It was a much bigger picture than just the story.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. It gives me a whole nother take on Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So early in the pandemic, my husband and I purchased a piece by you, which we absolutely love. And it greets everyone as they come into our home. It's on the stairway right up. And we got it framed in a very ornate frame, one of 2 pieces that we've had framed in ornate frames.
Oh, I'd love to see.
You'll have to come over.
I would love to.
Yeah. And I think your work demands ornate framing, to be honest with you. It's so exquisite. And when we were talking with you about purchasing the piece, it became apparent to me how dear that painting was to you. And I was wondering if most of your work is that way, if it's very dear to you.
No, not all of it. I mean, let's say I was having a show and there would be 20 pieces. Out of the 20, from my mind, there are 10 good ones, 5 really good ones, and maybe 2 or 3, and then maybe 1 or 2 masters. So a masterpiece really only means the master of that particular grouping of paintings, that particular show. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't always mean what people think that it means. It just is like the crowning piece of that particular series of paintings. And so, but oftentimes I would feel pretty rushed. And so have to do a lot more paintings and try to make them as affordable as I can, which means that some of them aren't going to be as good as others. So,
so when we purchased the piece from you, I knew that it was dear to you, and I asked you for a brief write-up on it. That was something that I've never done to anybody, done before with an artist. And I just knew that it was so dear to you that I did that. And I just wanted to let you know that it's still with the piece, and it will be with the piece forever. So
thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. So I asked you when we were prepping for this whether or not you would ever, I don't consider your work pop. I would consider it pop, but I see little elements in there of pop. And maybe it's just me, the colors, and some of the stuff that I consider pop, but I'm a little bit out of touch with the mainstream, you know. So when I consider pop, I think of things like Gorillaz as well. The band Gorillaz, are you familiar with them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that they're not really pop anymore, but that's what I consider pop. Your take on pop was absolutely fascinating in your response, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
So are you talking about pop surrealism?
Pop art in general.
Oh, pop art, yeah, popular, or, yeah. No, yeah, that's not, they always say that it isn't up to the artist to name their own genre, it's sort of like a nickname.
Yeah.
But I think most of the interesting artwork that's challenging is coming out of pop surrealism. And so there is some influence there for me, but I'm not poking fun at society per se in the same cartoony sort of way. But even though pop surrealism bends towards realism too, I think my work is sort of like nouveau realism. It's an invented world it has a very deep emotional connection with this one. So when you're the painting's looking back at you, or it's in the middle of experiencing something that we're privy to. So it doesn't really leave you out. It draws you in.
Yes, it does. It definitely draws me in. Yeah. So you had mentioned that the description, and you mentioned it here, of pop art was that it has an ironic comment on traditional fine art values. I love that because that's something that I really hadn't thought about. Andy Warhol is one of my favorites of all time, and he definitely had the ironic comment on traditional fine art values. I guess what my question would be is, I look at other pop art that doesn't have that, and was wondering what your take on that type of art would be.
Well, it'd be good to see examples to talk about something like that. But I mean, I think that art can be more decorative than it is message driven. It really, yeah. To be honest, I think I'd need to see some of the things that you might. If you can give me some examples.
Are you familiar with Karen Hackenberg at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay. She does really, I consider her work relatively pop art, and it's always got environmental messages in it. So like one painting that we have of hers it's a big crucifix that's made out of plastic bottles, clear plastic bottles that were found on the beach. Mm-hmm. And it's in front of a beautiful landscape. And I consider that kind of popish.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. I think, yeah, my work isn't really quite like that, although I've always wanted to paint a piece. It would be fun to do a really big piece of a balloon, a helium balloon, round one on a string with a rock holding it down in its earth, and then a pretty little stool next to it, and on a pin cushion with one pin.
That's cool.
So something that's just about to happen, and that would be commentary, kind of on the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. But I think that my work is a little more subtle, and I like the people who put it out there like that, because I think those things need to be said, and I think that's what art is for.
Yeah.
But my work is it feels like a more universal through personal.
I agree.
You know.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Like Cully, like the piece that you have.
Yeah, I love that piece.
Yeah.
Because you brought it up, I'm going to have to put it up there now on the blog.
Good.
So one thing that I found most intriguing on your website was that you used the phrase "the great mystery," and you capitalized "great mystery." Can you tell us what the great mystery is to you?
Oh, that's a big question. The things that we feel and don't know, the things that we just purely don't know. There's a lot of effort throughout human history to nail down why it is we're here, what the meaning of the universe and everything. Mm-hmm. But we don't actually know. Mm-hmm. And so to try and find that answer definitively and then think that you have that answer, or maybe even it's the same answer for everyone, is complete hubris. It's still a mystery whether you think you know the answer or not. So for me, some people find it difficult to not know, and so have to kind of wrest an answer from what's around them so that they feel more comfortable, even if it's something that's invented. Yeah. But if you're a little more comfortable with the mystery, then that's where artists come in, because we're more used to delving into the unknown and plucking things out of it and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That must be why I'm so into art, because I consider myself an agnostic, and I love the way that you articulated that you know, it's complete hubris to profess that we know. And I just really like that. I can really appreciate that. So in your video, I saw the face of Hecate. Okay, I knew I was going to mess that up. Which I will link to on the blog. I will put that on the blog. It's really impressive. And my biggest takeaway from it was when you unequivocally stated a disturbing reality of our culture is the denial of our darkness. We are expected to remain in a perpetual state of positive. And I love that. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, there's a story that I've told before about when I was on the road doing art fairs years ago, and I was in this little saloon, I guess you could call it, having some dinner, and this old character comes and sits down next to me. He's like, "Oh, you're not from these parts," and we got to talking, and he asked me what it is that I do, and I said, "I'm an artist." And he says, "Oh, you're a hippie." I was like, and he goes, "And you're a vegetarian, right?" And I said, "No, I'm neither of those things. I don't understand why you would say that." He goes, "Well, aren't artists hippies and they don't eat and vegetarians?" And I was like, "No, artists are regular people." And he asked me what I painted, and I described it as a little bit dark, and his face changed, and he's like, well, I don't like darkness. And I said, well, what do you think I mean by darkness? And he started going off about murder and that kind of thing. I was like, that's not what I'm talking about. And then I described him what I was talking about, and he ended up crying in my arms for a daughter that he hadn't spoken to in a long time, that there was unfinished business. And that's the kind of darkness that I'm talking about. It's something that's inside of us that we don't want to see. Mm-hmm. And if it's suppressed, meaning not assimilated by your psyche, whether it's crying or allowing ourselves to mourn or whatever other way that we can feel our feelings, then the darkness turns into eventually knowledge, wisdom, and self-knowledge, most importantly. But that could be anything. But to pretend that it's not there is a bastardization of being human. It's half of everything. There can't be one without the other. There just can't be. I mean, I suppose you'd be enlightened to the point of you'd be only your shoes left on the street, if which would be great if that were to happen. Mm-hmm.
I love that.
But especially in this culture, we're supposed to put a brave face on it and pretend like nothing's happening, and it's happening.
Rub some dirt on it, move on.
Yeah, well, during the pandemic, you really got to see what darkness, how that bubbles to the surface. And a lot of people were experiencing a lot of pain and a lot of confrontation because it was so quiet. We had to confront ourselves.
Yes.
And that's darkness we're confronting. And it's not a bad thing. It's just we're so busy and distracted that we don't have time to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I agree. I love that take. Absolutely love that take. So, you also used the following quote by Joseph Campbell in your video: "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." I honestly think that's one of my favorite new quotes.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary quote. Really, this all ties together within darkness and self-knowledge and all of that, which is the concept of love. And love is a word it's hard to understand. But I remember hearing in my young adulthood, God is love, and it occurred to me, well, if that's true, then I am God. And there's no separation between me and anything else. And so in the end, it really is conceptually who you are is what you love. Mm-hmm. And love takes on an uncountable number of aspects. It could be the glint in someone's eye. It could be a smell coming through a window. It could be anything at any moment, all the time during the course of the day. There's always something there. But we're not taught to recognize that. We're not encouraged to recognize that. Mm-hmm. So we've lost our godliness. We've lost our connection to all that is. We've lost our love. We've lost that. We don't recognize that being who we are is a privilege.
I agree.
And that it can only be attained by our own adventure and questioning and allowing our darkness to be, allowing ourselves to be ourselves.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of how embracing a specific element of your darker side has helped you mature into who you are?
Yeah.
Oh.
There's so many. When I was little, my parents would take us sometimes to the ye old curiosity shop.
Oh, yeah.
On the waterfront. And it was a creepy place. It was a beautiful place. And I, for some reason, liked the macabre. But I would go straight back to where the mummies were. So they're real mummies for people, those of you that don't know. Dehydrated people from different places in the West. And
petrified people, too.
He's petrified. I think she's just simply dried out.
Okay, yeah. Now I'm going to have to go back and take a look.
Yeah, you have to go check it out. So she's kind of chalky white, and you can still see her shriveled eyes, and she's got, her face is like this. And Sylvester, you can still see the gunshot by his hip, and he's still got his mustache. But anyway, they're in glass cases, and I would always go and look at them and stare at them. Mm-hmm. I couldn't take my eyes off of them. And it was this sort of concept of death and candy because there's lots of candy in that shop.
There is a lot of
Just
candy.
trinkets, this human nature of wanting to sell shit.
Yep.
And then there was these dead people who we didn't have their permission to have them there. We were gawking at them. But I felt like I took them seriously, like, who are you? And other questions, like, if I threw you in the water right now, like, how long would it take for you to just fall apart?
Yeah.
And wouldn't that be creepy? And I would imagine it in my mind. So I never talked about anybody about these things, but it gave me a fascination of what's underneath the skin. I really, really love skulls and bones of really anything. I think they're very beautiful. They're our architecture.
They are.
And so if I wasn't allowed or didn't allow myself to think of those things and only wanted to play with the Holly hobby because she's really positive, I couldn't have nurtured that part of myself that enabled me to reach into that darkness a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more as I grew up.
There's also a quote on your website that I absolutely love. It's one of my all-time favorite quotes, and it's art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable.
Yeah, Banksy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually not Banksy.
It's not? Who said it?
No.
No, you're right.
Caesar Cruz.
That was a very old, that's right.
It's very old, but everybody attributes it to Banksy.
It's because he put his name under, or somebody put his name underneath it, and it circulated the web, and so there you go.
Exactly. And I actually had to look it up when I saw it.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
You educated me there. It's
Yeah.
actually not Banksy, but it is attributed to him.
Good. I'm going to go in and, well, I can't actually change the film, but yeah, thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to give you a tip of the hat to that because that is what your art does. It both comforts me and it disturbs me, and that's why I love it so much.
It's a weird, strange kind of push-pull, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's really cool. I love
Yeah,
it. And there's no real question there. I just wanted to kind of do a tip of the hat there and transition to your hats. You've been doing some wickedly cool hats throughout the pandemic, and could you tell us a little bit about those and what pushed you in that direction?
Well, it started with the puppets and making them hats. And then I realized that I could make them for people heads too. So during, let's see, no, this was in October. I had lots of extra materials, and the first ones were put right on the top of friends' heads and sewn right on.
Oh, that's
And then
cool.
I got a head block and was able to make them. But I've been sewing since I was a little girl. I've had clothes made for me since I was in high school. I'm really, really into textiles, fabrics, fit, form, function, and the sculptural element of it too. And so when I started making them, it was weird. It was like I was just driven by this force and became absolutely obsessed with it. And I have no idea when I sit down to make one what it's going to look like.
Okay.
And I don't know. Now I know more about it. And I know, like a person walks into one of my shows and I know what hat's going to look good on that person. And but they're cozy, but they're a crown. They look like a crown. People look like royalty.
They do.
It's really interesting.
Absolutely love them.
Yeah, it's fun to have a party and have like a trunk show and have people try them on stuff. And they just they look so beautiful.
Are you going to make more?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's summer, so I figure I'll maybe work on some for a few people for Burning Man for the cold nights there. But I'm going to I have a little thing under my belt for this fall, not the stealth project, but the personal thing that, and I'll definitely come in strong with hats.
Okay, cool. Because I'm going to have to get one for my husband.
Oh,
he
yeah.
would love it.
Great.
So, yeah.
Cool.
So you've also, during the pandemic, you started an adoption center for the plague puppets.
I did.
And I recently adopted one.
Yeah, you did.
And is he there, right there? Oh, he's that one right there. You moved him. I love this guy. So put him right back here. Could you tell us a little bit about these guys?
Yeah, so that was the spring of 2020. Everything was completely shut down. And it was right at the apex of spring. So it was glorious, quiet. And all of a sudden I had this idea pop into my head and it was fully formed. And that happens sometimes. But in this case, it was really clear, powerful. I don't really know how to describe it. It was like it crash landed into my head. And I knew what they were called. And I just sawed the whole thing. And so I was on the phone with a friend of mine sitting right over there, and rummaged through some of my fabrics and started cutting up sleeves of shirts and started to make the first plague. They were originally called Plague Babies. And then I kept working on the design, and then once I knew that I had something really special, I knew I couldn't tell the story with the crappy old iPhone that I had. So I said out loud to the powers that maybe I need a new phone because I have to be able to tell the story. But I have to sell a painting. So that night I sold a painting.
Cool.
And bought the phone, and then it was on. And so there's been this propulsion with these characters where they're very healing, and I'm able to storytell with them. And when I started to adopt them, then people started telling their stories of their own or coming back to me with these crazy stories that involve puppets. There are so many amazing stories around these characters.
Very cool.
But they're not for kids. They're not toys, and they're not for kids. Each one they're all handmade, and they're all different.
They're absolutely adorable.
They're really fun. They've got a nice weight to them. They feel good in your hand. You can take them anywhere. Don't ever get it wet, though.
No. He's going under a glass.
He's going under. Oh, good. Yay. So now they just keep getting better and better. And I'm doing larger ones. These are the Baba Yetis. And they have this little clothes that come off. And they have, they're like, I asked myself the question, what would you do if you were creating, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
What would you do if you were creating for a museum? And everything kind of slowed down for me because I realized everybody in the world has to be doing this right now. I have nothing else going on except I've got a sewing machine, I've got pins and needles and fabric. And so I just started cutting up my clothes and making puppets and taking their picture. And all of a sudden they really came alive. So I'd mask up and take them places with friends. We would go to the Flight Museum and I would take pictures of them. We would go to the aquarium and I'd take pictures of them.
I remember seeing these pictures, some of them.
Yeah. And so, it just kept growing and growing, and it keeps blossoming forth. And I started making a comic with them and be able to storytell that way. So it's world building. It's world building, but I'm inviting adults into play, which is something that adults aren't always necessarily feel like they have access to anymore or that they have time for anymore.
Yeah.
And these do really help people to remember how to play and how to participate in play together.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Do you want to give a little tease or not?
Oh, yes. Well, so I have a stealth project going on now with some of my crazy friends and an amazing team of people, and we're doing an NFT project. And that's all I can say right now.
That's fine. That's fine. So what about your prayer candles? Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, the prayer candles, a friend of mine gave me that one you can see in my fireplace for my birthday years ago. She says, you should make some of those. And I thought, that's a really good idea because I wanted to do something for Christmas that would be a good gift idea. And then I worked with another friend who did the graphics, the beautiful graphics around them. And then I made a little write-up so that you could actually have a prayer and a good, expansive, loving thought while you light the candle. So it could be for altars or whatever every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. So we had a conversation about galleries and gallery representation. And I know that right now you're not looking for representation in a gallery. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what there is out there to offer me, but in my experience, I've worked with a lot of galleries, and the people have always been terrific. But I don't know any other job that has to give up 50% of their income.
Yeah, I agree.
And even if we have to give up 50% of their income, the way that the normal business model works is a shop buys the thing on 50%, and then they retail it and they add another 50%. So at least the artist is getting paid.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is, they could have a hold of your work for years, and then they don't share their client list with you, so you have no idea who's buying your work.
Yep.
And then if I have a client that wants something that's in their gallery, then I give up. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense for me. And then the other part of it is, I think galleries should really take more interest in individual artists and get to know their artists and most of the galleries that I've worked with, except for very few, have asked me anything about the paintings. They don't even know what they're about. They wouldn't, so they're just something on their wall to sell rather than having an actress interest in the person, in the artist, in their lives, in their career, and facilitating them in any way. They just put it on the wall with a price tag and hope that someone buys it. And I'm sure that they do marketing and all that kind of stuff too. But it's not personal enough. I think for 50%, you should be working your ass off for every artist that you have, and you should know everything about every piece that's in your gallery. But they don't.
I agree.
They just don't.
Yeah. Okay.
And I can sell it better myself. I've taken all my work out of a gallery and literally sold all of it the next day at a trunk show.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
that makes sense. Yeah.
I don't think it's because I'm a great salesperson. I think it's because I know my work.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love galleries. I love many of the gallerists that I've worked with, that I purchased through, I should say. And, you know, we've had gallerists over, and we will continue to have them over for dinner and to socialize. So this isn't a dig on any gallery by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, it's a different, it's a whole different concept. And I don't think people, when they buy art, realize that it's such a huge cut for the artist.
Oh, more usually. The last gallery had the normal 50%, but I had to ship it, which cost anywhere between $3,000 to $1,000.
Yeah.
And then it's not selling after 4 years, so they want to take a 20% discount, which then I lose another 10% plus shipping, and then I had to pay for the shipping back. So now I'm getting 35% of work that I easily could have sold on my own, thinking that maybe this gallery is going to do something to help my career, but that hasn't been the case. Yeah. So they're just, I just asked them to send everything back, and you know, they were very nice about it, but it's like, I just don't see what the point is.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate that. Yeah. So yeah, and like I said, this is not a dig against any galleries. Galleries have been very good to me as both a collector and on this. And, you know, they definitely serve their purpose. But
well, I love going into galleries, too. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And I want to point out, too, that I had a show at Bonfire Gallery here in Seattle, and he was the only gallerist that came to my house, had a cup of tea, sat with me, got to know me, wanted to see everything in the house. And then he said, he gave me the entire gallery. He says, whatever I can do to facilitate your vision. And so that's why I created the video that's on my website. Okay. I had sculptures hanging from the ceiling. It was the most incredible experience at a gallery I've ever had.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. And so I felt really supported. I didn't feel like I'm one of 50 artists that's on the wall. I was the artist that he was representing during that month.
Yeah. Well, that makes me feel good about what I'm doing, because my intent is to let people know about artists and a broad swath of artists, and, you know, a little bit more personal than the gallery experience. So,
definitely.
Yeah. But I do love galleries, and I will be going to a couple later this week.
Good.
So,
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So, do you have any call-outs for any artists around here? Local, national, global?
You mean call-outs? You mean something nice to say about?
Yeah, any artists that you like, any art institutions that you like?
I don't know, it catches me off guard a little bit. And the first thing my brain does is forget the names of anything.
Oh, yeah.
In a question like that.
I'm the same. I get hit on the spot.
Yeah. Well,
brain freezes.
I mean, there's so many for so many varying reasons. I think my call out would really be not to artists per se, but to any person who's following their heart. And that sounds pretty Pink Shades kind of thing. Yeah. But what it really is sacrifice and hard work and risk for doing something that means the world to you. I mean, it's the only reason that we have electricity, planes, writing.
Art.
And art is because people went after something that they really cared about, believed in, and brought to fruition. And it wasn't for those people during the course of humanity, we wouldn't have the things that we have. We wouldn't communicate the way we communicate. We wouldn't. I mean, so I think its most basic aspect of the call out is, you know who you are.
Yeah.
Living and dead.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, and I can appreciate that. And yeah, that's the best. That actually answered my next question, was call outs for any aspiring artists, and you covered that nicely. So I'd like to thank you for the use of your home and your studio.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, and I love that the puppets are out here for display for everyone. And
They're watching.
yeah, I'll take a picture of these all staged out and put them on the site as well.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So, thank you. And make sure that you subscribe on YouTube. My mugshot should appear sometime soon, and all you need to do is click on it. Thank you. And thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Bye.